Welcome to the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center 2019 webinar series. My name is Rosemary Blizzard, and I am the Business Manager and Communications Director for the RCVRC, and will be your moderator for this webinar. Due to the large number of attendees, participants have been muted for this session to reduce audio interference. For better viewing, you may expand or minimize your menu control panel by clicking on the orange tab located on the left edge of the panel. If you have technical issues, please use the chat feature located at the bottom of your control panel to send us a message, and we will try to assist you. Questions or comments related to the webinar may also be submitted using the chat feature. The webinar will be about an hour, followed by a brief question and answer period. Questions we are unable to address during this live session will be answered in a follow-up document, which we will email to all attendees and also post along with a recording of this session on the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center website as soon as possible. For those that are not familiar with the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center, we provide a compilation of best practices and firsthand experiences from jurisdictions that have used this method of voting with a focus on election administration. The website, rankedchoicevoting.org, and our other resources have been developed as educational tools for election administrators, policymakers, voters, candidates, and others. Today's presenters are the entire RCVRC team. In order of presenter, we have George Gilbert. George serves as an election administration consultant for the RCVRC and has over 25 years of elections experience as the director for Guilford County in North Carolina. Melissa Hall. Melissa is our newest member and is taking on the role of Education Director. She has 4 years of experience of classroom teaching, and we are excited to have her on board with us. Chris Hughes. Chris is the Policy Director and Counsel for the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center. He also co-produces the RCVRC's podcast, RCV Clips. You can follow him on Twitter at @ThisChrisHughes. Chris is admitted to practice law in the state of New York. As I said earlier, I'm Rosemary Blizzard. My current role with the RCVRC is Business Manager and Communications Director. My career in elections administration started 20 years ago as a local county elections director. Over the years, I've worked on both the local and state level in various elections administration roles. Last but not least is Gary Bartlett. Gary serves as the Executive Director for the RCVRC and was the North Carolina State Elections Director for over 20 years. And with that, I will send it over to George Gilbert to get us started. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Rosemary, and good morning to everyone. I am George Gilbert, and I have the easiest task this morning, which is discuss what took place with the jurisdictions which have previously conducted RCV elections and which had no significant changes to their process or procedures in 2019. These include the 3 jurisdictions, and interestingly, they are of very different sizes. St. Paul, Minnesota has 163,000 registered voters, and they roughly had about 56,200 people vote in their November 5th municipal election. Now, the result of that was that in 5 of their wards, the candidates received more than 50% of the first choice votes, so there was no further RCV tabulation required. But in the two of the wards, they did require additional RCV tabulation. And tabulation in St. Paul is, of course, conducted by hand. But in Ward 1, there were 66,797 ballots, and it only required 1 round of additional tabulation, so that one went fairly quickly. Ward 6 had just under 6,000 ballots cast, and it required 4 rounds of additional tabulation. Discussing their results with the folks in St. Paul, they basically said, well, you know, this is just running another election for us. It's what they've been doing, and that's the way they run elections in St. Paul. As I said, their tabulation was by hand. They had completed that tabulation on Friday following the election, and the canvass was not until the following week. So they completed their hand tabulation of all their ballots in more than sufficient time to meet the canvass requirements. Portland, Maine. Portland is conducting, I believe, its third ranked choice voting election. Portland has a little over 55,000 registered voters, of which more than 18,200 voted in the November 5th election for mayor. Now, in Portland, only the mayor's contest is conducted by ranked choice voting. Their tabulation this year, they did use the ES&S Express Runoff software, and which was a slight change from the past. They have used a different set of software in the past to conduct their tabulation, but the ES&S Express Runoff software was available since they now use that in the entire state of Maine. The election was resolved, even though it was a fairly close election. They had 3 candidates who received substantial percentage of the first round votes. But after 3 rounds, the candidate that was leading in the first round, in the first choice tabulation, won the election. And they had that results available on election night. Telluride, Colorado has only about 2,200 registered voters, and just over 1,000 of those voted in their November 5th municipal election. Once again, mayor was the only office which was subject to ranked choice voting, and the mayor won on first choice votes there. So they did not do any RCV tabulation. I would note that Telluride's authorization for use of ranked choice voting in its mayoral election included a sunset provision following this 2019 election. So the future of ranked choice voting in Telluride is either uncertain or non-existent at that point. So that's but everybody basically said there were no real issues, and that was just running a normal election for all of them. At this point, I'll turn it over to Melissa to tell you about the jurisdictions that did have some significant changes.
Thanks, George. All 3 of these jurisdictions, Cambridge, San Francisco, and Santa Fe, used RCV in local elections, as do other jurisdictions. However, these 3 have updated their implementation in some way. For each of these jurisdictions, their ranked choice voting history, the changes to the implementation this past year, and the outcome will be discussed. Cambridge has used the at-large form of ranked choice voting, an American form of proportional representation, to elect its 9-seat city council and 6-seat school committee since 1941. Ranked choice voting is used to conduct municipal elections in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Cambridge uses no wards or districts, and it is spared the expense of administering a primary or runoff election, as the entire election happens on a single ballot. In August of 2018, the City of Cambridge announced the launch of the newly acquired ImageCast vote tabulator, which was utilized for the first time in their 2018 state primary. ImageCast voting tabulators are a part of Dominion voting systems. While the design of their new tabulator is similar to the AccuVote system they used in past elections, there are some new features that improve its usability, which I will discuss further when I show a sample ballot in a minute. So as you can see here, Cambridge had 68,795 registered voters, with a turnout of 21,324, which is about 31%. They had a voter education website and created a very detailed 2019 Cambridge voter guide that included election information, registration steps, polling locations, a fact sheet on the newly modified municipal ballot design, how to mark the ballot, and how the ballots are counted using RCV. The image you see here is a sample ballot for City Council. The instructions to voters are located at the top. This new design makes it easier to navigate and is more user-friendly. One of the new features of the ImageCast vote tabulator is that the voter will be able to see if their ballot has been cast successfully or if a ballot error has been detected. If an error is detected, the voter will be provided with the option of having the ballot returned to them to make the correction or to cast the ballot without correction. With 26 candidates for City Council back in 2017, the highest number of candidates since proportional representation was computerized in 1997, it became evident that ballot modifications would be needed to address a further increase in the number of candidates and to improve the usability. In Cambridge municipal elections, voters rank the candidates in order of preference by marking numbered ovals next to the candidates' names. Instead of having the same number of ovals as candidates, the Election Commission is capping the number of ovals at 15. So as you can see here on the sample ballot, there are 22 candidates listed on the left side with 15 ovals on the right. There is no limit to how many candidates can run for City Council or school committee, but the updated ballot only has 15 ovals next to the names, even if there are more than 15 candidates. In March 2002, San Francisco voters adopted ranked choice voting as an amendment to the city charter, and it has been used in every local election since 2004 to elect the mayor, city attorney, board of supervisors, and 5 additional statewide offices. Ranked choice voting has been a staple of San Francisco's mayoral and municipal elections, where it has been correlated with increased candidate diversity and voter turnout. In early 2019, the city approved a lease agreement between the Department of Elections and Dominion Voting Systems for the use of Dominion's voting system to conduct elections in San Francisco, which began with the November 5, 2019 consolidated municipal election. This new voting system, Democracy Suite, features a more intuitive method for marking the ballots, allows voters to rank a greater number of candidates in contests that use ranked choice voting, and provides a simpler ballot navigation for voters with disabilities. So as you see here, San Francisco had just over 495,000 registered voters with a turnout of just over 206,000, which is about 42%. Several races such as city attorney, public defender, sheriff, and treasurer were unopposed. The office of the mayor won with the majority in the first round. However, the district attorney and District 5 supervisor races went to 3 rounds of RCV. Those races were too close for comfort, setting up a ranked choice voting showdown. At one point, the DA race differed by a mere 0.67% or 879 votes, while the District 5 supervisor race was neck and neck with only a 0.2% or 35 vote lead. Now, to educate San Francisco voters about the new voting system, the Department of Elections rolled out a robust outreach program. The program included various strategies such as newspaper notices in multiple languages, posters on MUNI, which is the San Francisco Municipal Railway, and BART, which is the Bay Area Rapid Transit. They also had public service announcements for television and radio, sent household mailers, posts on social media, hands-on demonstrations at venues throughout the city where voters could practice using the new voting system, and RCV presentations throughout the city. The image you see here is a sample ballot for mayor. Voters continue to use paper ballots to cast their votes. However, in recent elections, voters had connected arrows pointing to their choices on the ballots. Now voters will fill in ovals next to their selections. Using an efficient grid layout for ranked choice voting contests, the new system allows voters to rank up to a maximum of 10 candidates, instead of the limit of 3 candidates that the previous voting system allowed. The new accessible ballot marking device offers better audio and touchscreen interfaces and is compatible with a number of assistive devices. In March of 2008, Santa Fe voters adopted a charter amendment to elect their city officials with ranked choice voting. RCV was adopted in 2008 and used since March 2018 for mayor, city council, and municipal judge. The city used a new voting system, Democracy Suite, created by Dominion, who also provides the voting equipment used for RCV elections in the California Bay Area. In March 2018, Santa Fe held its first mayoral and city council elections with ranked choice voting. Following a positive campaign, the election was successful, with a surge in turnout for a mayoral election. This year, RCV was featured in the city's one competitive city council race. The city of Santa Fe had the smallest change to implementation this year compared to Cambridge and San Francisco. This year's Santa Fe City Council election was different from the ones in the past. They moved from the city administering elections to the county. So this year, the county's clerk's office took over. Also, this year is the first year that the election is being held in November. They moved their elections from March, even year, to now November, odd year. The change is the result of the 2018 Local Election Act to increase voter turnout. So as you can see here, Santa Fe had 58,850 registered voters with a turnout of just over 9,000, which is about 15.4%. District 4 is the only city council district to which ranked choice voting was applied this year, and District 4 was won on first choice votes alone. Their voter education included radio and TV advertising, household mailers, and social media posts. The Office of the Secretary of State has developed a New Mexico voter information portal, which was a one-stop shop for voting information. The city clerk and voter education websites like Vote Different Santa Fe were great resources for voters that included the election information and practicing sample ballots. Well, that's all I have, so I'm going to pass it off to Chris.
Thanks, Melissa. So I'm going to spend some time talking to you all today about all the places that used ranked choice voting for the first time this fall. That was 5 cities in 4 states: Eastpointe, Michigan, Las Cruces, New Mexico, St. Louis Park, Minnesota, and Payson and Vineyard, Utah. There were a total, based on results right now, a total of 29,376 first-time ranked choice voting voters this fall, and 13 officials were elected by ranked choice voting for the first time this fall. So I'm going to start with Eastpointe, Michigan. Eastpointe is a small suburb on the northeast side of Detroit. They have 26,124 registered voters and had a turnout of 4,991 voters in their ranked choice voting election this fall. They're the first city in Michigan to use ranked choice voting since Ann Arbor used it for a single mayoral election in 1974. Things have changed quite a bit since 1974, so we're sort of thinking of this as the first ranked choice voting city in Michigan in a new era of elections. Eastpointe actually adopted ranked choice voting to remedy a Voting Rights Act lawsuit that was brought against the city in January of 2017. The lawsuit alleged that Eastpointe's at-large city council races, which elect 2 people every 2 years to their city council, diluted the votes of African-American voters in the city, which are a rapidly growing portion of the population in Eastpointe. In order to settle that lawsuit, the city of Eastpointe adopted ranked choice voting for use in their city council elections and did it for the first time this fall. It's also the very first time ranked choice voting has ever been used as a Voting Rights Act remedy. So we were really excited to see that happen and to get to participate. We got to help out a little bit with the implementation. We were really grateful for that opportunity. So Eastpointe used, as I said, multi-winner ranked choice voting for their 2-seat city council election. They used ES&S equipment with the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center's Universal RCV Tabulator, which got certified for use in Michigan elections this fall. This is the first time the Universal Tabulator had ever been used in a public election, so we were really excited to see that happen and to get to help out with everybody in the city in getting that set up. And this on this slide is a picture of me on the far left and Grace Ramsey, who worked on voter education with the city, and the amazing city staff at Eastpointe who put together this election. Their RCV education campaign consisted of a voter education website, some candidate trainings that Grace Ramsey, who's wearing that the cardigan and the sweater next to me in the photo. She ran a candidate training in a lot of town halls all around the city of Eastpointe to teach voters and candidates about ranked choice voting, how to campaign in ranked choice voting, how to vote, and how to make the most use of your vote in a ranked choice voting contest. The city also sent around a flyer in their water bill to voters to make sure everybody knew what ranked choice voting is. The one amazing thing is that Eastpointe implemented ranked choice voting in 4 months. The Voting Rights Act lawsuit got settled in July, and the election was November 5th, 2 weeks ago. So it was a little bit like building a rocket ship as you're taking off, making sure everything was in place, education, machines, ballots, anything else that might come up, just had to get made as soon as that question came up to make sure that the election went off without a hitch in Eastpointe. And luckily, things did go well. The results were known by noon on Wednesday, the day after the election. Next, we have St. Louis Park, Minnesota. Oh, and this is the ballot from Eastpointe, if you want to take a look at that. And I saw in the comments someone was asking if they could see the ballots up close. We'll make sure to send around links to all these ballots in the Q&A document after the webinar. Next, we have St. Louis Park, Minnesota. St. Louis Park is a suburb just on the west side of Minneapolis, which already uses ranked choice voting. This was St. Louis Park's first time. They have voter registration of about 33,000 voters and had turnout of 6,600 voters, or 20% of that voter registration. They're the third city in Minnesota to adopt ranked choice voting after Minneapolis and St. Paul, which you heard about earlier, and they adopted ranked choice voting to eliminate their primaries, to go down to a single high turnout election in November. They adopted ranked choice voting in 2018 and implemented it this year. The city only used single winner ranked choice voting for their mayor and their 2 city council seats. They used ES&S in the Minneapolis method. So this is a method of ranked choice voting counting that Minneapolis created. It's essentially using typical paper ballots you see in any regular election, ranked choice voting or otherwise, that get scanned in and put into a spreadsheet, which the Minneapolis method is essentially a spreadsheet-assisted hand count of their election. And we have a whole webinar about this from last year that Grace Wackler-Rowitz, the city clerk or the elections director in Minneapolis, did for us, if you want to learn more about how that spreadsheet method works. One interesting thing about St. Louis Park is their RCV education campaign was designed as part of a Center for Civic Design voter education course at the University of Minnesota. So I'm going to unpack that a bit. The Center for Civic Design is a group that we've had the opportunity to work with on usability studies for ranked choice voting to help understand how to design better ballots for voters, to understand how to design better voter education for voters, just to make sure that people, when they're using ranked choice voting, understand it and feel empowered by it. So it was really exciting to hear that the city clerk in St. Louis Park was taking this course at Minnesota's grad program for election administration and had the chance to design their whole voter education campaign for ranked choice voting in the course of that class. And this is on the screen is a screenshot from one of the many videos that they put together teaching voters about ranked choice voting. And you can see more about their voter education campaign on St. Louis Park's website. And we'll be sending around a sheet with links to all the different voter education materials that we're talking about today. St. Louis Park also held a candidate training for their candidates to teach candidates how to campaign under RCV. That was led by Jean Massey of Fair Vote, Minnesota. And Fair Vote, Minnesota also has a lot of great resources and information and analysis of the St. Louis Park election if you want to learn more about that. Next, we have Las Cruces, Mexico. Las Cruces is the second largest city in New Mexico after Albuquerque. They have a population of about 102,000 people. I couldn't find voter registration data, unfortunately, but based on information I got from colleagues at Fair Vote, their turnout, which was 13,975 voters, was about 20% of voters in Las Cruces. They're the second city in New Mexico to adopt ranked choice voting after Santa Fe, which you heard about earlier, And like Santa Fe, they adopted ranked choice voting to eliminate their runoffs, which were required if nobody got above 40% of the vote. So Las Cruces also uses single winner ranked choice voting to elect their mayor, city council, and municipal judge. They had their mayor race and two of their city council races went 2 rounds of counting this year. The mayoral race was super competitive. There were 10 candidates running and it went to 9 rounds of counting. At the end of those 9 rounds, you still had 90% of ballots cast in the first round, counting for one of the final 2 candidates. So you saw really good usage of voters' ballots. On the ballots in Las Cruces, voters could actually rank all 10 of those candidates. And we haven't yet gotten the chance to look through all the detailed ballot level data to see how many candidates people tended to rank, but it's a good sign that 90% of ballots were still counting in the final round in such a diverse and big candidate field. The city council races went to 2 or 3 rounds apiece as well. Las Cruces, like Santa Fe and San Francisco and Cambridge, uses Dominion's Democracy Suite, which has ranked choice voting integrated into the voting system. I had the chance to speak with the county clerk who ran the election in Las Cruces about their voter education campaign for the city. And they said that they did at least 20 community presentations to voters about ranked choice voting. They also received a training from the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State trained all the county clerks on ranked choice voting. And the county clerk also, after Las Cruces adopted ranked choice voting, set up a meeting to plan their implementation out with the Secretary of State and with Dominion, their vendor, to make sure they were dotting all their I's and crossing all their T's. The city or the county also covered ranked choice voting in their poll worker trainings. So one interesting thing about New Mexico, and this is true in Santa Fe as well, is counties can use a vote center method where voters throughout the county, no matter where they live in the county, can vote anywhere in the county. So people in Las Cruces who maybe live in the city but don't work in the city could vote outside of the city in the Las Cruces election. So poll workers across the county had to be trained on ranked choice voting. And we're just given basic information about telling voters how to mark their ballot, how to rank their choices. I also heard from the county clerk that they had no budget increase due to ranked choice voting, which is a good sign. Finally, we have Payson in Vineyard, Utah. Payson has voter registration of about 8,700 voters and turnout this year of 2,779 voters, or 35.7%. This is actually higher turnout than their mayoral election, which is pretty exciting to see. That turnout went up in a non-mayoral contest. And then Vineyard, which is actually the fastest growing city in the United States, had its highest raw voter turnout ever. They had 1,012 voters show up, which I think is double the amount of voters they had in their last election, just because the city is growing so fast, and they had a turnout of 28%. They're the first 2 cities in Utah to use ranked ballots, and they both eliminated primaries for their local elections. So Payson and Vineyard adopted ranked choice voting because the state of Utah passed a pilot project that allows cities across the state to adopt ranked choice voting through 2026 to see how they like it, how it works for them. And they were the 2 pioneers, essentially, that got out in front and wanted to see how ranked choice voting worked for them. They both use a modified form of multi-winner ranked choice voting that we call sequential instant runoff voting. It's a bit of a mouthful, but the short version is that it's instead of multi-winner where the threshold of election depends on the number of seats getting elected, sequential always requires the winner to get a majority of the vote to win. Payson and Vineyard both used it for their city council seats this year, Vineyard for their 2-seat city council, Payson for a 3-seat city council. And they, like Eastpointe, used ES&S along with the Universal RCV Tabulator, which also got certified for use in Utah for these elections. So we were really excited to see it actually get used in 3 cities this fall. They also used the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center Visualizer, which you can hear more about in the webinar we did about a month ago about the tabulator. We also covered the visualizer. Payson and Vineyard both had their own voter education websites that Utah County, which ran the elections, set up for them. The county was really enthusiastic about ranked choice voting. They were excited about the opportunity presented to them to run ranked choice voting and see how it goes. So they, put a lot of work into running these elections and learning as much as they could about RCV. I asked if they received any training from the state, and they said, or if there's any training scheduled for the future, and they said if anybody's going to give a training, it's us, because they've spent so much time learning about ranked choice voting. It was also a vote by mail election, which I don't think we've seen a purely vote by mail ranked choice voting election before. So we're excited to look through the data there and see how voters use their ballots differently in a vote by mail election when they maybe have more time to think about their rankings. And similar to Las Cruces, the county saw no budget increase for their ranked choice voting elections. So one final slide, I just wanted to give some totals on the number of voters and officials elected by RCV. We saw at least 336,000 voters use ranked choice voting for the first time this fall, or not first time, sorry. Ranked choice voting voters used 336 voters used ranked choice voting this fall, and 36 officials were elected by ranked choice voting. And with that, I'll pass it off to Rosemary.
Thanks, Chris. The section that I'm going to cover today is the areas in the country that had ballot initiatives involving ranked choice voting on the ballot for the voters to consider. We had 3 cities, 4 ballot questions, and there are changes coming for some. We'll start with Easthampton, Massachusetts. Easthampton's located within Hampshire County in western Mass. It's an absolutely beautiful area. I was there about 2 months ago, and just gorgeous part of the country. They have a population of about 15,987 individuals, with registered voters making up about 11,952 of that. Again, these numbers are going to be estimates based on what we could find at the time, so please don't quote us directly on those numbers. It appears that November the 5th, you had about 4,100 or 35% of the registered voters participating. They were presented with 2 RCV questions. They had RCV option for mayor and RCV option for city council. The third question that you see in the graphic, which I hope you can see, if not, we'll include the link, moved the mayor had the option to move the mayor to a 4-year term. You can hopefully see with the graphic that all 3 questions passed with a pretty considerable percentage margin. These questions were put on the ballot in Easthampton by the City Council as a potential charter change, and under Massachusetts law, it went to the voters, obviously, and then pending state legislature approval, implementation could occur as early as 2021. There is an option to delay 1 election cycle if it's deemed necessary. Overall, it's been a very positive process for the city of Easthampton, and we're looking forward to seeing the next election cycle where they actually put RCV into implementation. The other city in Massachusetts that had ranked choice ballot initiatives was Lowell, Massachusetts. It's Middlesex County in northeastern Massachusetts. Has a population of 111,000, give or take, with about 60,000 registered voters, an estimate. Participating voters on November the 5th were around 19%, or 11,000. The voters in this city were provided separate options to allow RCV and or moved to a districts for their city to elect their city council as part of a 2017 federal voting rights lawsuit. As you hopefully can see from the graphic, question 1, which was the RCV option, failed by a little over a percentage point, or about a little over 200 votes. Question 2 was the option to elect city council via districts, passed with a bit more margin. Keep in mind that these questions were non-binding, and the city council is not obligated to do either of these. We'll be keeping an eye on what they do decide, and if they make any changes to their election methods, the changes would go into effect in 2021. And if Rosemary would learn to hit the right button, I could advance the slides. So let's try that again. The third city, which of course needs no introduction, would be New York City, New York. This is probably the one that most people were keeping an eye on because of New York's, it's New York City and one of the largest, if not the largest city in the United States. Population of about 8.4 million, with registered voters, give or take, making up about 4.7 million, or 57%. With 90% of the precincts reporting on November the 5th, there's an estimate of about 15% turnout. We'll reserve judgment on whether or not that's a good turnout or not. But it does look, as you know, it was overwhelmingly approved for proposal number 1, which allowed a charter amendment to allow RCV and city primaries and special elections for various offices. Those offices were for mayor, city council, public advocate, comptroller, and borough president. The changes would take place as early as 2021. And that sort of concludes my particular part of the presentation, and I'm going to go ahead and move it on to, last but not least, our Executive Director, Gary Bartlett, who's going to give us a brief overview of what's going to happen next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary. Going to give you a brief preview of ranked choice voting elections in 2020 and beyond. We will start with a little background, then Hawaii, Kansas, Alaska, Wyoming, Nevada, and then Maine. The Republican Party in a few states, more so than the Democrats, and such as Utah, have used some type of ranked choice voting tabulation to determine their choices, who would represent them on the ballot. And this is the first time that voters affiliated with the Democratic parties in Hawaii, Alaska, Kansas, Wyoming, and Nevada will have a ranked choice voting presidential primary. The rules set forth by the National Democratic Party states that any candidate who exceeds 15% will receive their proportional share of delegates. Each state is responsible for funding their primaries. I know that some states have public, but a lot of states must ask for donations and get money from private sources. The following information is evolving and is subject to change. First of all, Hawaii. Hawaii is going to be managed by Merriam River Group, who specializes in elections. We have had a chance to look at their plan. We've had conversations. They have been open to suggestions, and also they have stated that they will use us as a resource on an ad-needed basis, which we're very happy to do so. They are going to be sharing with us, along with Fair Vote, voter education materials to be reviewed and also to be commented on. And we think that this is very important and look forward to it. The program will offer both mail and in-person polling on election day. For instance, the mail program, they estimate that they will send out about 1 million ballots and anticipate around 250,000 to return. And then on election day, there will be 20 polling sites where people can vote in person. They also will have the ability to accommodate most people with disabilities. And The voting equipment that's going to be conducting this election is the Unison Open Elect Voting Central Scan. The voter will have up to 3 rankings to choose. One of the things that I would like to share here is that this process will take place over a 2-day period. Miriam River will have the tabulation after the polls close of all mail ballots. However, because of Hawaii being on, I know at least 3 different islands, maybe more, the in-person vote totals will be tabulated the next day. Once all tabulations are completed, the ranked choice voting will begin, and it will be tallied by congressional districts. Alaska, Kansas, Wyoming, and Nevada are still in the planning stage and also fundraising and negotiating for services to conduct the election. Not all information is available and certainly not public. But what I believe that I can say is that Alaska will have in-person voting and a more limited mail voting program, and possibly have up to 5 rankings. Kansas will be all mail elections and possibly up to 5 rankings. Wyoming will have in-person voting and mail voting, possibly up to 5 rankings. Nevada has a little different system. They are going to use ranked choice voting only for early voting, and the results will be incorporated in their caucus decisions. Now, what makes, one of the things that we will monitor is that we want to provide assistance in any way that will be helpful to these states. We're very much interested in the voter education, and also the biggest thing that we hope comes of these elections is, number one, a good voter experience, and the voter has confidence in the outcome of the election. Also, we hope that the states or the parties will make public the cast vote record so that there can be independent verification of results. And certainly there are lots of different things that would be on our checklist, but that would take another 30 minutes for me to go over, like rules of tabulations, definitions, instructions on the ballot, layout of the ballot, but we will not go into that, mainly because of time issues. Maine is leading the way. For the first time, they are expanding their ranked choice voting to include presidential elections. And of course, they are the first in the nation to do so. It will start in 2020 when there will be the ability to elect presidential electors of Maine's electoral college proportion, and that is they will have 4 presidential electors. 2 will be elected statewide, and then there will be an election in each of the 2 congressional districts in Maine. Also, the ranked choice voting will be used in the presidential election in 2020. And lastly, it will be expanded to have presidential primaries in 2024. The governor did not sign this bill when it was passed, but allowed it to become law. And the reason is to allow the legislature to come up with funding sources for primary elections. Before that, the general, their assembly did not have that opportunity after the bill had passed. So that is why we will not have presidential primaries. But we're very proud of Maine, and we think that they will be very successful. As you know, they have proven to the nation on a bigger budget and a lot of enthusiastic voters. Ranked choice voting was utilized and well received. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Rosemary for questions and wrap up.
Thanks, Gary. As we're kind of perusing the very active chat feature, good job, guys. Just if you have any direct questions to us or want to know how to get up with us or find out more about our RCV clips and social media, that information is there. And with that, I will open up the floor for questions. If you'll use the chat question feature located, some of you are very familiar with it already, at the bottom of your control panel to ask any questions you may have. We've had a few. I'm going to call on my colleagues to help me navigate a little bit if there are any questions that we could go ahead and start with.
There was a quick one I saw that I'm going to send to George. Michael Odden asked, both Portland and Telluride RCV didn't have the result change from their first round plurality results, but did RCV have anyone who was in second place come from behind to win in later rounds in St. Paul?
No, they did not.
Yeah.
Right. The first choice candidates in both of the contests that went to RCV tabulation ended up winning both of those contests.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Just bear with us here. We kind of reading through lots of comments.
There was another one that I saw that we just got from Steve Chesson, who's out in California, asking about variations and implementations. So to get really into the weeds, which might be of interest to people on this webinar, there's different ways that different jurisdictions handle things like overvotes. If someone ranks too many candidates at a single vote, if somebody skips multiple rankings in a row, different cities handle those things different ways. Some of them keep counting the ballot, they go to like the next valid ranking. Other places say if they run into a voter error like that, then they can't count any later rankings on the ballot. So Steve's wondering if there's variations in conflict between implementations when the federal bills, HR 4000, which is the Fair Representation Act, and HR 4464, which is the Ranked Choice Voting Act, get passed. He's wondering how those conflicts get resolved if the federal law is different from local practice. And to be honest, I can't answer that question. I think Fair Vote would be best suited to answer that question because those are their bills. I'd say, I think two things. One, it's likely that state law and probably local law will change in response to federal law itself changing. It might be like an awkward, slow-moving process, but I would expect that local law would change pretty dramatically if ranked choice voting does pass at the federal level. And if even if that doesn't happen, we might just see slightly different implementations at the local level versus the federal level.
Chris, you are correct. Federal law trumps state and local law, and everyone will have to get in line with whatever the federal law states that you must do to have ranked choice voting.
Well, but that would only apply to federal elections.
That is correct.
Right.
Most likely the states would apply the same rules to all elections unless they had some.
It'd be counterproductive.
Yeah, if they didn't. But I would also add that there is not a superior, necessarily a superior way to do it. The variations that exist in ranked choice voting tabulation rules, everybody has their preferences. But I don't think that anyone can say that one is right and the other is wrong. So, it may be in the federal law that they may modify those provisions as the bills get considered, and we don't know quite what we'll end up with.
Okay. I do have a couple of questions have come through. People are asking for a copy of the presentation or the PowerPoint. One of the things that we do as part of our resource center, part of our name, is we do keep a library of all of our webinars. This one is also included in that. We will prepare a post-webinar package that we will email to all attendees, and this webinar, along with any supplementary information, will be on our website when we'll share that link as well. So if you'll give us just a couple of days after today to sort of pull all that together, we'll make sure that you have the information you need. Guys, do you see any other questions that we want to cover today? We have about 7 more minutes that we can sort of stay online. We don't want to use up everyone's precious time, which we thank you all for spending the time with us today.
There were 2 things that I thought would be interesting to pull out from chat. One was Steve Chesson mentioned that the Lowell result, that was like a pretty, about a 200 vote margin, 1% margin, with multi-winner ranked choice voting losing in that advisory question, that it's very similar actually to the result from San Francisco, because before they adopted single winner ranked choice voting, they considered adopting multi-winner ranked choice voting in the late 1990s. And it was also up against districts in Districts 1. So it's interesting to see that, sometimes for as much as things change, things also stay the same.
Yeah, as I was preparing that slide, I was looking at that, and you and I have both talked about that independently of today about, I think a lot of people, we understand districts. I mean, that's more something that we've had more experience with just as individual voters, and it may be that the district, they felt more comfortable making that choice. So we'll see how things, flesh out over time.
Right. And the other thing I saw, Andy Anderson mentioned or reminded me that Amherst, Massachusetts is underway implementing ranked choice voting for 2021 as part of a charter amendment. And then, which reminded me also that Benton County, Oregon will be implementing ranked choice voting for the first time in 2020. And I'm not sure if they're going to be using the universal tabulator. I don't think they are. I think they're using express runoff from ES&S. George, do you remember?
In Benton County, they are using our tabulator to verify the results of the ES&S equipment.
Right.
Right.
You gotta love that multi-use tabulator, guys. Good job.
It's a Swiss Army knife.
There you go. All right.
And we would like to say, I know in that regard, I think we will be requesting from all the jurisdictions that used ranked choice voting in this election copies of their cast vote records. And we have our development team right now working on completing conversions of each vendor's cast vote record into a format that is readable by our universal tabulator, so that hopefully it will be universal by next spring, and that we would be able to use the tabulator as a verification tool for election, independent, and open source verification tool for any of the vendor tabulation systems.
Right. Well, and on that note, Craig Simon asked, are any of the vendors offering or planning to offer ballot marking devices that support RCV? George, Gary, Rosemary.
I don't know. I mean, as far as I know, the ballot marking devices have to have the same capability that their paper ballot systems have.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
I would have to say yes. I would certainly expect that the ballot marking devices would be as capable as the paper systems of
And they
executing
should be.
ranked choice voting.
Yeah, I know based on the research Karen did before she left in her conversations with vendors, all those ballot marking devices, can operate with ranked choice voting. We are exploring a more thorough accessibility study of ranked choice voting ballots to make sure that if people are using ballot marking devices, that marking the ranked choice voting ballot, casting it is truly independent and as accessible as possible. So I guess the short version of this answer is yes, they do have ballot marking devices that support ranked choice voting, but if you ever speak to people in the disability rights community, they have a lot of issues with ballot marking devices generally. And we just want to make sure that if people are using ballot marking devices, that they're really, truly accessible when using ranked choice voting with those devices.
There's always room for improvement.
Yeah. We also just got a question from Hugh McNichol in Michigan asking if there's been any RCV election audits yet. So we did a presentation on audits a year and a half ago, I think, maybe a little bit longer even. And we talk about the places that have audited ranked choice voting, which are San Francisco and Minneapolis, and a bit of information about what's happening next with ranked choice voting audits. One exciting thing that I just learned this morning actually is that San Francisco is running a pilot risk limiting audit of ranked choice voting using their vote by mail ballots on Thursday morning at 9 a.m. I'm excited to hear how that goes, but we don't yet know.
Chris, I'd like to share that in 2010, North Carolina did a limited audit of ranked choice voting.
Perfect. All right, I think we're just about out of time. I do see one more question. Which of these communities have the best examples of RCV training for their voters? Anyone have opinions on this? I saw a lot of good voter education. I'm curious if people have anything that stood out.
I looked at a lot of the links.
Anybody mad?
I looked at a lot of the links as I was preparing the slides and whatnot for today, and in the same vein as Gary of not wanting to make anyone mad, I think one of the best things you can do as a community for your voter education is to know your community and know your voters. And so while there may not be one best, you have to look at and evaluate each community's education series based on how well they know their voters. And I know I'm spitting it out badly, but everybody seemed to do a good job, and the fact that all of these elections and ballot initiatives appear to have go off without too many hitches on November the 5th is a credit to the elections administrators that had these ballots to deal with this year.
Yeah, and I know we need to take a closer look at the cast vote records we do have and those that we can get from jurisdictions if we FOIA, or when we FOIA, to see how people ranked ballots. But I know from all the early stuff I saw that, consider Las Cruces, where they did a ton of voter education, they had a competitive mayoral election. People appeared to really use that mayoral ballot that allowed them to rank 10 candidates. So that would be an interesting place to look.
Mm-hmm.
And we do still need to check how people used ballots, but based on everything I've seen from past ranked choice voting elections, people have been pretty good about making use of their rankings. And I think you're always going to have people who only want to rank one person, and that might not be to their benefit. If that person isn't very popular, their vote won't have a chance of counting for the winner. But that's the opportunity you get with ranked choice voting.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, we are over our hour time that we've allotted. If anyone has any other questions, please feel free to email us. I'll put our contact information back up for just a second, and we will include those questions that we did not get to in our Q&A transcripts for our post-webinar package. And with that, if anyone else has any other comments from the team, going once, going twice. All right. Well, thank you all for attending today, and we will see everyone later. I don't know what else to say. Thank you.